Good morning, good afternoon and good evening, wherever and whenever you are listening. This is We Are The One, Lincolnshire FA's official grassroots football podcast, where we speak to the amazing people who make football happen in our communities. This week we're speaking to Chris Sumpter, the media officer at Scotty United Junior Football Club. We speak to him about his creativity, how he has developed Scotty United Junior's media presence to be some of the best in grassroots football in Lincolnshire, and the impact that has had on the club. Enjoy. So I am sat here with Chris Sumpter from Scotty United. Chris, just talk to us about your role at Scotty United Juniors.
Well, got two roles. Coach an under-16 teams now. I've taken them since they were under-8, so quite a few years now. And I'm also the media, comms, marketing, whatever you want to call it, really. I look after that side of it, which mainly for Scotter is covering the social media side of things.
Fantastic. And how long have you been at the club then? Because obviously, if you're a coach, we've obviously just been chatting off air and talking about that. You've obviously typical story of your son got involved and you was asked to sort of support with coaching.
Yeah. Well, I had an interest in sort of coaching and got the opportunity to sort of go on my level one, just really with a view to helping out the coach. And I did that for 2 weeks. And then he told me he'd got a job working away that was going to involve him moving outside the area. And it kind of fell on my shoulders really to sort of take him on. And that was 8 years ago now. So quite a long time I've been doing it. Yeah.
Fantastic. And in terms of the actual role of that media officer or social media manager for the club, how did you get involved with that? And, what sort of led you to take that role?
Well, in terms of, in my previous career, I've changed careers now, but I used to be a journalist. I used to cover Scunthorpe United for the Scunthorpe Telegraph, so I've always had that kind of media interest and what have you. And the one thing I thought, I've been doing it since, I think it was 2019, I sort of took it on, so about 6 years or so now. Yeah. And the one thing that I've always felt is that, more so now than ever before, that social media is such a powerful tool for grassroots sport, clubs in particular, because it's free advertising. You can make it what you want to make it. And with me having my background that I did and having an interest in it, it was just something that I kind of offered to take on. I think Facebook, the club had a Facebook page previously, which had, I think it was 129 sort of likes and followers for it. And we had to start from scratch because we couldn't get access to that page. But we started a new one, and now I think we're at sort of 1,300 and counting. So we've done something right.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. In terms of, I know it's very difficult for you to maybe answer this question, especially so early on into this episode, but do you think that maybe the impact of social media is maybe more prevalent, I guess, at a grassroots level as opposed to maybe a professional level? Or obviously it has its place for both, but do you think that real sort of community impact is great?
Yeah, definitely, because it's a voice, and it's an opportunity certainly for how we approach it, is that it's an opportunity for us to kind of showcase everything that we do. It's you kind of putting yourself in the shop window. We want to let parents of our players know what's going on at the club, and we also want to let other people know what's going on for if they're looking for clubs for their children, they can suss us out, if you like, for want of a better word, to just have a look and kind of see everything that we're about. And it offers so many opportunities in terms of promoting the businesses who sponsor teams and helping give them a little bit of publicity and something back. And just kind of, it's just there to put yourself in the shop window, I think, really.
Yeah, fantastic. In terms of, the social media at Scotty, you are fantastic at it. It has to be said. It is absolutely brilliant. And it is well known actually for being, probably one of the best sort of, the social media for junior teams within our area. What was your sort of vision when you first took that on and when you started it, and how did you sort of go about making that vision a reality?
Yeah, that's a very good question. That's a very good question. I don't know, really. I think looking at Scotter as a club as a whole, it's very much an inclusive club. It's very much everybody gets equal game time. That is where the emphasis is on, and we've tried to really take that sort of real community and a positive place to be into our social media coverage. And I've got to be honest, I think when I first sat down to do it, I'm not really sure there was a plan as such. Mm-hmm. It was kind of just a case of going out there and sort of seeing how it rolled, if you know what I mean. And we did a lot of stuff at first, perhaps just kind of like trying to put positive messages about there, using pictures and that of players and things like that. And just that seems to have snowballed into, as we've had different ideas, taken bits and bobs that I've seen elsewhere and what have you, and maybe kind of like manipulated it a little bit for what I think's better suits how we do things. And it's just sort of grown and grown and grown. And we're always sort of trying to think of new and innovative things that we can do, but at the same time keep that sort of positive message about what we feel is a really positive club to be involved with.
And who would you say is your target audience, I guess? Is it the parents of the players? Is
it
maybe depending on the platform maybe as well?
Definitely, yeah. We tend to find that Facebook is parents. I mean, everybody loves seeing, you only have to go back to when you used to get scorers and that in the newspapers and that from grassroots football when you were allowed to report results and everything. It was the first thing that people looked for. And so we know that parents love to see sort of kids getting recognition, which is why we try to do a lot of that on our Facebook stuff. But we have found as well, or I've found in the last sort of couple of years, that as our Instagram audience and that's grown, we've probably got quite a large percentage of our older players in like our under 16s, 15s, 14s, 13s, what have you, that use Instagram as a platform. They're often the ones liking the post rather than the parents on there. So it does differ from platform to platform.
And do you have to change the content you maybe put out on Facebook and Instagram, or is it like minor sort of tweaks based on, because obviously that your older players are going to be seeing it on Instagram as opposed to the players on Facebook?
We tend to keep it the same really, because I don't think the percentages are enough to warrant a change on that front. I'm quite happy for everything we do to keep that uniform approach, and it also, if I'm being brutally honest, makes it my life easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
there are only so many hours in the day.
Well, this is it, and I think that's the thing that actually a lot of people forget is that you're a volunteer at the end of the day, and you're giving up, your spare time, your energy, and as we've sort of touched on before recording, it's a lot of energy, especially over the Christmas period that we've just come out of, where you're constantly trying to think of things to be done, especially if games are postponed, or that as we know at this time of year, pitches get frozen, as we've mentioned about as well, that you're constantly having to try and find things to keep putting out in terms of that content and that creation, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a never-ending job, really. But I mean, we are lucky at Scotter in that all our managers, or most of our managers, buy into it. They understand the importance of it. I think probably get a few nudges from parents as well on promoting their children and things like that when they've done things that are worth doing. But it is a very, while I'm kind of like the head of it, it does need all those people to take the time to take the pictures, send in the words and things like that we can then mould into the post that we use on there. So it does fall on my head, and it is quite time consuming, but there's a lot of people that sort of help make it, because I wouldn't be able to find everything out myself. So,
well, that was going to be the next question I asked you, Ashley, was, there'll be other people who will listen to this, and obviously there are lots of other media volunteers across sort of grassroots football in Lincolnshire that are in a similar role and have that challenge of, you'll have to correct me as to how many teams Scotter actually has, but it must be in 20 plus teams? Or
no, it's not that many, actually. It's not that many. It's about 15 in the the setup.
Okay, yeah. It's still a lot of teams, though, in terms of obviously having to try and collate all that information, all those images, and I'm presuming then that's how you do that. The managers send that information to you, and then you sort of, you work through that and create the content based on that.
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, I would have a sort of a set people doing it at set times and everything, where you know where you are for kind of planning and whatever, because I do find if I can schedule stuff, it makes it a lot easier from my perspective. But I'm conscious that, like myself, everybody's volunteers. You know what I mean? Yeah. Some people might not have the time to do it like in the aftermath of a game and send it in. Sometimes it'll be the Thursday, and it's just about making sure that everything we get sent we use, because that's important, I think, and just that everybody kind of buys into it and understands the value of it, what we can get from it as a club, because without that sort of commitment from everybody, it does make it very hard work. It would do for an individual, and I don't think you'd really get the full value from it. No, absolutely. And we've sort of touched on the fact that social media isn't just about posting content. It's obviously about building that level of community as well, which it sounds like you've done a fantastic job already at. How do you sort of ensure that your content engages not just your players, but also the parents, anyone who comes to outside of parents to support your teams, and I guess the wider community of Scotter as well, really, because the club itself is something that the village or the area of Scotter will be incredibly proud of. Yeah, and I think so, and I think for the size of the village that Scotter is, I mean, we've got about 200 players registered, which is really good. You know, a lot of those come from out of outside the village, from like Scunthorpe, Gainsborough, whatever. Everybody's got a reason for wanting to be with Scotter, but it is a very much a community based club. You know, a lot of I think a lot of our main costs, certainly of our younger age groups, all go to Scotter Primary School and what have you. So anything we can do there on socials to champion the club, and particularly with that working with the community, you know, it's always well received. I think the biggest thing, or my kind of approach to it is things like giving players. We'll do players of the match for most of our teams every week. We've just gone through a bit during Christmas where we did like a secret Santa. Where we got anybody really, parents, coaches, whoever, older players, if they wanted to sort of send in messages, just to kind of say something positive about something connected with their team, or thank somebody for something they've done, which we don't always get. But I think I've always tried to think that none of us are involved in kind of grassroots football for being, you know, getting a pat on the back or anything. But I think sometimes it's nice to kind of just reward, you know, that dedication and time and everything that goes into like planning teams, working with players over a period of time. And like when I was, my daughter plays for a different club. She plays at Broughton Ravers for one of the girls' teams up there, and it's kind of like, I always think with it that as a parent, you don't particularly remember kind of results from matches as such, but I'll always remember the first time my daughter got Player of the Week for her team, and you know, and I think it's important to kind of champion those things because they will always mean something to somebody.
Sort of level of detail that, you know, you sort of take pride in, really.
Yeah, I think so. Although I've got to say, I think in that instance, I think that's probably by chance. I think if you started doing it with their own, I mean, we've got one that's sponsored by a business, so that, you know, put a little bit more in our kitty and things like that for the team, but we do try to. We are very much about. I'm always a firm believer that even though kind of you're playing grassroots football, then I want to make our players feel like Premiership players, if you know what I mean, by just getting a bit of spotlight and a little bit of recognition to kind of champion what they've been doing. And like you say, things like that I think do go a long way and are well received.
In terms of how, you know, that impact that has on the player, and you know, I really try to push as much as I can in trying to, you know, doesn't matter what level you're at, you want to try and make your players and your community feel like they are at the very top of the game. And you sort of said there, like, they can feel like they're Premier League players. How much of an impact do you think that actually has on the player as an individual?
I don't know, really. I'm not really too sure. I mean, kids are kids, I think, at the end of the day. So for the younger ones particularly, I'm not sure how that much. But the parents, it does. And in all fairness, I think a lot of grassroots sort of coaches and whatever will tell you that I think keeping parents happy is just as important as keeping children happy.
Yeah.
So I think that goes a long way with them. Particularly, I think for the older ones, I think we've had some in our kind of another feature we did over the New Year Christmas sort of slowdown was on New Year's Eve. We featured 11, I think it was, kind of stars of 2024, where I literally just asked coaches to pick out one or two players in their team who they felt had warranted a little bit of praise. It wasn't necessarily for the player who'd scored 20 goals or the goalkeeper who'd saved 5 penalties. It was more for kind of like something that they maybe brought in terms of their attitude, their application, that kind of thing. It was a chance to give them a spotlight that they perhaps wouldn't normally do. And I know for a fact that sort of some of our older players that were featured in that were really chuffed with that. So
fantastic. In terms of, and you've obviously spoken about various different sort of content ideas and, you know, projects that you've sort of created and come up with. How do you sort of keep things fresh and interesting? Do you have sort of a strategy behind that? Is it just sort of you look to see what, you know, maybe others are doing? Is there a little bit of everything in that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it has to be, because it does kind of fall on my shoulders really to come up with these ideas, projects, whatever you want to call them. I'm very I like having a look around, just seeing what other people are doing, and sometimes I'll see something. And the one I was telling you about, where we did the Secret Santa for sort of positive comments. I can't remember who it was, but I'd literally just seen like one club make a post saying, "Oh, we've just had some really nice feedback about a particular training session. Thank you very much." And then kind of like thought, that's brilliant, love that, but then wanted to try and put our own stamp on it and see how we could develop that. So I think I do get inspiration from other areas, but then always try and turn it a little bit to give it our own stamp and make it a bit fresher. But sometimes it'll be something that I've got, like I've had in the sort of memory bank that I thought I'll do, I'll write it down or whatever. Other times something will just literally come to me like that. Thankfully, it doesn't often take a lot of thought. Thankfully, it just kind of happens, which is probably a good thing.
I think so. I think it means that. I think it shows your level of creativity. And is that something that you're always trying to do? You're always trying to create and come up with new ideas and be that. I mean, you've used the word innovative in the last 5 minutes. Is that something you're always trying to be?
Yeah, definitely. I think you can do things that work, and I think it's good to carry on doing those things that work. But I think you've also got to think outside the box and then try and look to do something new and something different, keeping it fresh, while at the same time not moving away from kind of what your values are and what you want to aim for. Yeah. I'm always thinking of things that we can try and do to raise the profile of the club in terms of bringing a little bit more sponsorship. I mean, we're really grateful to Nicer Local, who came on board this year, and we for the last couple of years we've done the Player of the Match posts, which have always been really well received. In the summer, I sort of sat down with the exec committee and said, I really think, bearing in mind how popular these posts are, how many likes, shares and things that they're getting, the exposure that they're getting, I really think we ought to use this as an opportunity to monetize them really and bring in a little bit of extra cash for the club, which we did. Nicer have come on board with that, and now all our Player of the Match posts carry their sponsor or carry their logo, as like a sponsor. And we're all the time thinking of it now. Is there any other avenues we can do to bring in some more money? So it, as well as being a nice opportunity to champion and promote what we do and our values and ethos, it's also a chance to make a few quid as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, have you seen? I mean, obviously that's one really good example of, I guess, that noticeable impact on the club since improving the club's sort of social media and media output. Have you seen sort of any other sort of noticeable impact, whether that be player recruitment or other bits of sponsorship, or I guess maybe just sort of general awareness and interest in the club?
I think so. Yeah, I definitely think it's helped in terms of interest and probably bringing in a few players. I think a few managers have sort of said, "Oh well, they've mentioned about you doing this and all that." So it does carry some weight, I think, in that sense. It's a difficult thing to kind of measure, really. Unfortunately, I wish there was some way of gauging it. I think looking at maybe carrying out a survey and including things like that on top of the other things that we where we could improve or what we do well as a club with parents at the end of the season is something we've looked at doing before, and that might be something we introduce and can try and gauge in that. So it's quite difficult to really read how where it is having an impact, but we're doing something, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And I mean, your posts sort of capture effectively the essence of grassroots football, in my opinion. What, in terms of the positive aspect of it, and we need to try and make grassroots football as positive as it is, because there are certain things that we're all aware of that maybe aren't so positive. But actually, the coverage that you give Scotty United Juniors is fantastic. So, what do you think sort of makes grassroots football, in your opinion, sort of so special, and how do you try to I guess reflect that?
Well, I think the biggest thing is I think it's a game for everyone, and it's out, and particularly at Scotter, we are a club for everyone, regardless of ability, ethnic background, whatever. We are a really inclusive club, and I think I consciously do try to reflect that in terms of pictures and that we use. I try to get everybody. I mean, I'll go out on a match day on a Saturday when the weather permits and get some photos of teams. They're not of any great quality, I'll be honest. I'm not a qualified photographer, but I think teams appreciate you going out and taking that time. And again, it's an opportunity to capture memories for people, and that goes a long way, I think.
Absolutely. And I mean, what would you say has been a Has there been a standout moment in terms of, you know, a bit of positivity that you've been able to share?
Good question. You put me on the spot now. I'm not sure really. It is difficult because I'm not I struggle a bit with the praise that I get for it sometimes. So I'm always like trying to move on to the, you know, yeah, that was good and that was really well received, but now we move on to the next thing. And I can't really pinpoint. I mean, I think in the last sort of probably 2 years, I think we've really like hit a really good level in terms of the content, the quality, the graphics and things that all go along with it. You know, when I first started out, I would probably say it was a little bit raw. But I think we actually now have quite a professional look to what we do. We've got like a brand. I would call it as a brand in terms of, you know, a recognisable sort of look to our posts and whatever. And I think that is important. But again, I think it's a difficult thing to kind of like gauge a reaction for. Yeah. But we do get it. It was nice to sort of hear your comments about saying, you know, how well we're doing or whatever, because a lot of people do sort of say that, and I don't think we perhaps acknowledge that enough. We just kind of like carry on, or I just carry on with it. And I say it's always about moving on to the next thing once we've done something. I don't tend to dwell on how well or not well particularly something was received. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you've mentioned the strong brands that I guess that you've sort of developed for Scotland United Juniors now. Is that something that you have, I guess, previous experience in? Is that something you just sort of picked up along the way and learned? Because it is, like I say, it's everything looks unbelievably good.
Thank you.
It's fantastic. So is that something that you've got natural sort of experience in, or is that something you've learned with the role?
It's something I've learned with the role. I think with my journalism background, media background, I've obviously I have that kind of like spark there. I think a little bit for want of a better word, but I've always kind of had my own ideas on how I would like to work with things. I've always had an interest in design and that kind of thing. So being able to use my background and my interests and obviously my passion for football, I've all just kind of neatly aligned really, and it's worked quite well. But I think that's important. I think the branding side of it is important for just being recognisable. You know, we can post things and people will know it's us, if you know what I mean, without it actually to say Scotland United Juniors on there. Yeah. Which I think is testament to what's kind of important from a social perspective.
Is that maybe like a bit of advice you would potentially give to? I mean, there might be other media officers at other clubs sort of listening. Do you think that's maybe one bit of advice you would give, is sort of developing that strong brand and sort of building from there?
I think so, but I think the bottom line is it depends. All depends what you want to get out of it for your particular club, and it also depends on the time that you can devote to it. I mean, I don't really think there's a wrong way for anyone to go about it. I think anything anybody can do for grassroots football and their club is a good thing. You know what I mean? It's providing the posts are obviously sensible, be a bad thing, and I think people will appreciate it. I don't think it needs to be a polished look, professional look. As I say, when I first started out with it, I think raw was probably a good word to use for it in terms of the content and everything like that. But I think the more you do it, the more you grow into it and become familiar with it, accustomed to it, and I think you'll find over time, anybody who does it for a period of time, I think you develop a style, and that gives you a bit more confidence in what you want to achieve with it and give it that branding. I think for me personally, the one thing I always wanted us not to do was to start it and then not continue it. Because I think it's awful when you get it and people go all out for like 4 months, but then people decide they don't want to do it anymore and it stops, and you get pages with no posts on and things like that for a long period of time. I think doing it gradually and maybe doing a couple of bits a week and finding a level where you can deliver that sort of that standard, you know, commit to doing that regularly will help everybody, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a lot of people will sort of naturally assume that the role of a media officer or a social media manager is quite easy, but actually it's not by any stretch of the imagination. And in terms of that, you know, that tricky side of it, especially when it comes to things like, I guess, you know, a safeguarding aspect, how do you sort of manage and handle those sort of the challenges really?
Yeah, well, I think you've got to keep on top of obviously the FA's regulations around safeguarding. I mean, we're very conscious, like I mentioned, about going out and taking pictures. We'll always seek permission from opposition teams that we're taking so that they know they're there. We've had a couple of issues this year with teams or situations with opposition teams where we've said, well, this player can't be featured on social media. This player can't, whatever, for whatever reason. So we have to make sure that we stick to that and no photos of those children are on there. Often we'll send the pictures to the opposition coach, just say, are you okay with these? So it can be quite time consuming. And you're right, there is a lot more to it than kind of just on the surface. But I think common sense really is the biggest thing to take with it. And I would put myself in a position of, would I be happy if my child was the one that was being featured in this post, content, pictures, etc., etc. And I tend to think of myself as a decent human being. So if I'm happy with it for that, then that parent would be. When all of our children sign up at the start of every year, one of the questions that they're asked on the form that parents have to fill in is whether they're happy for their children to feature in any social media work or website promotions and things like that. So we'll only do the ones that do.
Super. In terms of, you mentioned before about you sort of seek or look for inspiration with other clubs and anything. Is there anyone or any club in particular that, when it comes to that level of inspiration, that you can just sort of think of off the top of your head that you thought, well, actually they do some good. There
isn't really. I mean, a lot of it. I'll even look at like professional teams, like your League Ones and things like that, like what they're doing. I still use X, and I find X is quite good for being able to just like skim through a lot of things, and so I'll often be trying to take inspiration from things they do, or even if there's something that like a professional team will do that doesn't really naturally transcend into the grassroots game, is there anything we can do with it to kind of look at that? And I'm already now trying to look at like video content and that. We don't at the moment, we don't really do any video content, but that's something I want us to try and focus on and make it like little more quirky bits and whatever, featuring players and what have you, rather than being like sort of footage of things, just like bits and bobs with players. But that's a work in progress at the moment.
Really show their personality.
Yeah, definitely.
Things like question of the week, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, things like that. Maybe getting down to training and putting some little challenges on and things like that in training, just to give it a little bit of a different edge to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Sounds like a good idea. I'll be keeping my eye out for that. In terms of sort of what advice you would give to maybe other grassroots clubs who want to improve their media presence but don't necessarily know where to start, what piece of advice would you give?
I think, like I've said previously, I think commit to doing what you've got the time to do. The bottom line is if one person's willing to do it, that's great. The more people you can get willing to chip in is brilliant. I think as a club, certainly for us, I mean, I'm lucky in that the exec committee at Scotta kind of more or less leave me to just go ahead and do it. But I think if you're wanting to go as far as establishing a brand and identity, then I think everybody needs to agree on that, and you need one kind of overarching person to look after all that. But other than that, I would say the more people you can get dialing into it, that are willing to just send you bits and bobs, anything that I've said to our managers, anything you think's worth it, then send it, and I'll make it work, even if it. I mean, they'll be the first to admit I'm lucky in terms of my journalistic background that I can maybe tweak things and spot lines in it that they might not do when they send it in, but anything we send in, there'll always be something that someone will find of value, so we'll use it. I think the biggest advice is commit to an amount of time or posts you can devote to it and work around that. Because as I say, I think it's awful when you start something and then stop it 2 months down the line, and just try and get as many people on board with you as you can. Yeah,
fantastic. Good bit of advice, that. I suppose one of my final questions for you, Chris, is a pretty it sounds like a pretty straightforward one. Why do you do what you do?
Because I enjoy it. Most of the time. there are times when you sat there on just before New Year's Eve and you've got 11 graphics to do and then 11 posts of stars of the year to turn around. But no, I think the bottom line is I enjoy doing it. I think you've got to have a passion for it to make it work. And it allows me to, as I've said previously, knit together all the interests that I've got. I like my design work. I love being involved in grassroots football. And so getting the chance to pull all those together is is the dream. If only I could get paid for it.
Well, we often say here, if volunteers in Lincolnshire were paid for their time, we'd have a lot of millionaires.
Oh, brilliant.
So I think that's very much the case for yourself as well, Chris. In terms of my final question for you, what's next for you? What's next for Scotty United Juniors? Are there any sort of new ideas or projects or anything bigger from a club perspective? I know that Scotty United Juniors has gone from Scotty Juniors to Scotty United Juniors.
We've merged with we've joined forces with the men's team. Originally, although we had connections, we were Scotty Juniors and it was Scotty United, the men's senior team in the village. But we've joined forces now, basically to offer all of our children a pathway through into adult football, which was lacking a little bit before. So now all of our players, once they're coming out of the junior section, are entitled to a free, I don't know whether it's 2 or 3 week trial with the men's team to see what they think of them, whether they like the environment, whatever, to progress into open football. Other things, we're looking at hopefully forming our first girls teams or our first girls teams in, I think, about 15 years or something like that coming up. We've got some really good coaches who've put a lot of work into bringing together groups of girls only training for the last sort of 8 months, and we're now hoping to move that onto the next step. And just kind of like, I think we're really forward thinking exec committee there. There's a really good set of people involved now with the club who are very keen to kind of drive it on to new things. So they're doing a lot of work, spending a lot of money with you guys in the pitch program to improve the pitches up at the main ground. There's lots of things going on.
Fantastic. Well, Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure to sit down with you and sort of pick your brains and sort of see why you do what you do. And obviously, as I've sort of touched on before, you are absolutely brilliant at what you are doing. So honestly, please just keep it up and keep doing what you're doing. Because you are absolutely smashing it. And I would highly recommend any clubs or anyone who's in similar roles or wants to see what Scotty United Juniors are doing in the media space, then absolutely head over to your social media and your website and everything and just sort of have a little look as to what's going on. But Chris, thank you ever so much for coming in. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Zach.